There is now nothing off limits when it comes to digital violations of the Geneva Convention. And that's the future of cyber warfare. On the night of the 25th into the early morning of the 26th, the Russians hit the Ukrainian State Border Guard with a wiper virus. I got to see firsthand the absolute suffering and human effects and the fact that people froze to death because of a cyber warfare attack.
Where were you born and what was your life like growing up, Chris?
Well, I was the first person in my family born in U.S. mainland. The rest of my family comes from Puerto Rico. And I ended up growing up between all sorts of places in the U.S. and Puerto Rico, but especially around Washington, D.C. and NASA Goddard Space Center. One of my grandmothers was the head of NASA's secretary, so I believe the second NASA employee ever under Mr. Van Braun. And her husband at the time also worked for NASA, and then her next husband worked for NASA. And my mother also worked for NASA as a programmer as well before she went into robotics and automated factory assembly programming.
Were you interested in space, becoming an astronaut? Like, did that appeal to you as a young person?
Oh, man, did I want to become an astronaut. I had all of my own little patches and my mini spacesuit all ready to go, and I loved the idea of space. Unfortunately, though, I guess I read a few too many books instead of playing outside as much as I should have, and I became a bit too nearsighted to be able to be an astronaut the way I wanted. I think I was about 5 years old, and my mother started teaching me some basic programming, and I started enjoying it. And at the time, you could get magazines where you could start programming your own games, because the gaming industry was not what it is right now with esports and everything like that. And I just became fascinated with creating something of my own, because I think a lot of us, especially as children, the world is not necessarily made for us, so we have to create our own little space somewhere along the lines. And for me, that little space was in computers and making my own games. I was always kind of fascinated with like horror movies and creepy things, so I made a few haunted house games where it would surprise you with like mystery pop-ups and what we would call Easter eggs, and suddenly there might be a ghost or a vampire or something like that.
Tell me about the first time you kind of ventured into the world of ethical hacking. How did you do it?
Well, at the time, my school had gotten a pretty big grant at the time to go ahead and install these new computer systems in the library. I thought, hey, I love the library. I love computers. So let's explore. And that's exactly what I did. And I explored so much, I found my way into the Department of Justice and the FBI. And I thought, this can't really be real. It must be a game, because their passcode was only 0000. So I didn't think it was real because it was too easy. Unfortunately, as I was just in all of these mystery files and learning about undercover FBI agents, 2.5 weeks later, I was caught red-handed in the library wearing pigtails. They did not expect that.
Can you tell me more about how you managed to hack into the system? Like, what was your process?
The computer systems used what was called a dial-up modem, which there are still some places in the world, like Germany, US, etc., that still have dial-up modems. And I would just dial up numbers, see if there was a modem on the other end. And when I got them, I would see if there was a way to communicate with that computer and what was on that computer. And in many cases back then, there were no passwords or passcodes, and you could play a game on someone else's computer, for example, or access recipe files or whatever. But in this case, I thought it was a brand new game. And I thought, whoa, this is great. This is better than some of the other games. And no, it was real life.
And then talk me through what happened. How did they kind of come in, and what was that encounter like as a young person?
Well, it was not a nice encounter. Obviously, when you're a kid and you see two grown adults who want to take you to a police station, you're like, oh no. You have no idea what's going to go on. You've been taken from your safe place, which is in front of a computer in the library, to some place that's very cold. And unfortunately, because many in my family had very high security clearances, they had decided to give me an administrative order where I was not allowed to use most types of computer equipment until the age of 18, which made me very, very sad.
And what about the adults around you? Like, how did they react when they realized like what you've been doing in the library for fun?
Well, their careers were kind of put at risk because when you have a very high security clearance, the threat was that they could have been basically suspended with their security clearance being re-reviewed for being associated with me, the child hacker criminal.
How did your career in ethical hacking and cybersecurity begin, Chris?
So for a while, I did disaster recovery, and I concentrated on pandemics, epidemics, and certain types of natural disasters, biohazards, and nuclear events, as well as still in, we'll say, precursor of cybersecurity and ethical hacking. Because I love to challenge myself and solve puzzles. I'm a very curious person. And I think that's what ethical hacking is versus criminal hacking, which is done for, we'll say, bad purposes to put money in your pocket and harm people. I just want to solve puzzles. An ethical hacker, if we happen to see something that could be dangerous, that's risky, that could cause an issue. Let's say we come across a website and it's leaking medical data. We want to be able to tell the authorities and the company or the NHS or the hospital or whomever, hey, listen, you do not want these medical records of, say, I don't know, certain sexual orientations, certain illnesses where people could be discriminated against, or that somebody could use that in what's called a social engineering attack to then try to get money fraudulently from you or someone else. I see that there are a lot of risks when it comes to our modern world. And if I see particularly harmful cases where it is getting people killed, then I pay special attention to that.
In 2009, you helped halt the wave of attacks that was against South Korea.
Yeah. So I was working for a company named Unisys, and we were monitoring hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of different computer systems. I had been experimenting with some of the earliest systems of using different forms of artificial intelligence and cybersecurity to see if I could use language and math and machine learning and a few other things to predict a cyberwarfare attack. And it just so happened, my prediction and my algorithms happened to be true. So we were able to very quickly detect the attack, see how widespread it was. So, for example, we're sitting in London, and one of the things they leveraged were the high-speed trading lines that are used by London traders to help accelerate the attack. And not only aimed against South Korean telecommunications, their version of the White House called the Blue House, it then turned towards the United States and started aiming towards the White House, and then attempted to take down the FAA, which attempted to take down air travel that day, until it was halted by recognizing the attack and then spreading the word to try to get digital borders shut out as quickly as possible to minimize the effect. So on our monitoring systems, I detected 383,000 systems aimed towards both the United States and South Korea before we shut it down. And that was only a taste and only of what we could see.
What's going through your mind when you see that coming into play?
Is it real? Who can I get somebody else to look at this, to verify this? And then who do I need to call after that to try to get it shut down as quickly as possible? And I remember speaking with a chap at DEF CON one time. He came up to me and he's like, it was my first day when that happened, and we talked on the phone. And he worked for the U.S. government and part of the FAA. So I was trying to contact as many people as possible and using national level computer emergency response teams to facilitate.
For the people that are committing that cyber attack, what's the aim there? Like, what are they trying to achieve?
The aim in the case of North Korea is typically disruption and to show that they have power. They like to flex power. Unfortunately, when they do that, they also do things like small-scale terrorist attacks inside South Korea. And that was also a worry that it would spread and it would turn physical very, very quickly.
And was it confirmed that it was North Korea that were?
Yes, it absolutely was confirmed. It was North Korea. Not from me, but from a government's attribute, not me.
Another thing I wanted to ask you a little bit about was the Saudi Aramco hack, which I believe was like one of the worst hacks in history. How did that play out, and how did you become involved in that, Chris?
Oh, that was brilliant. Brilliant. Early 2012. Iran had just recovered from Stuxnet from the year earlier, and then they got hit with another piece of malware called Flame. I think it's now been renamed to something else. And the Iranians were like, hey, wait a second. What are we going to do with this? So they developed this piece of malware called Shamoon, and they actually used some of the Flame malware that had been used against them. And they were able to use an email social engineering attack to get 2 administrators who worked for Saudi Aramco and get the malware in. Now, at the time, Saudi Aramco, like many companies, way too many companies, although, they did not have the best cybersecurity. They concentrated all of their stuff on their oil production, and nothing was encrypted on the business network. What the Iranians did was the Shamoon was a logic bomb, and they had it set for a certain amount of time while it just sat there and waited. Now, Aramco did not have an intelligence apparatus, so they did not see a posting. And the posting was on this website called Pastebin. And it said, at this day, at this time, all of your computer systems will be destroyed. But they didn't see that. So on August 11th, 9:08 a.m., just as the posting said, computers in Saudi, for Saudi Aramco, started going dark, but with a burning American flag before they went black. And it was called a wiper virus, where it wiped certain parts of the operating system. So when you tried to start it back up, it was missing those primary files, so the system could be lost. Now, it had caused such a massive issue that at the time, the world's governments freaked out. And it was estimated that a barrel of oil would have gone as high as $400 to $450 a barrel. Now, after the escalation of the Russian-Ukraine war, we saw highs of well over $100 US, and many people were literally left out in the cold because of heating costs. Now, imagine if that had quadrupled, but in 2012. And the malware took out approximately 85% of the Windows-based computer systems. And it was only by the grace of Allah that there was one system that kept it from taking out all of the oil production. Now, the CEO at the time stated that not a drop of oil was lost, but that doesn't mean that some of the oil production was not affected. He also made this fantastic statement where he said, IT is like oxygen. You think you don't need it, but then you can't breathe. Now, they had gone full digital. Imagine using your phone. Wait, that's digital on your desk. Oh, how about a phone list? Oh, wait, that was on SharePoint. Oh, yeah, we can't reach any of that. Who do I call? How do I make payroll? How do I get the petrol or gasoline loaded into trucks and then sent to other Middle Eastern or other countries? Because it's all digital. So after a while, after about 2 weeks, they finally decided to, actually less than that, to give away petrol for free to make sure that none of the other neighboring countries were affected. Then, because they are so wealthy and with the largest fleet of private aircraft, they flew directly to factory floors in Southeast Asia to pick up hard drives to replace all of it. And so if at the time, between around September 2012 till January 2013, everyone else in the world paid almost 20% more for any sort of hard drive or memory because Saudi Aramco picked up the world's supply and it raised up the cost just to restore. But they had the money to restore. Any other company would have absolutely been obliterated. and that would have been bad. I was working for Aramco and heading the information protection group with my team. And I was having a rare lunch, and a very large man in a very nice suit came up to me and said, "You've been summoned." And I was like, oh, did somebody die? Did they figure out that I'm mining Bitcoins on their high-performance computers? Or is it something else? And he said, it's above my pay grade. And I was like, uh-oh. So he takes me to the managing director, and he goes, "Listen, Chris, there's a problem at the embassy. Can you go check it out? They won't really tell me what it is." So I go down to the embassy, and I'm allowed to take one person, who was my chief forensics person, who was Dutch. And we enter the embassy, and there is a very angry man yelling at a very young man. And it turns out that is the ambassador, who looks just like Saddam Hussein, but very nice. And it was the IT guy's second day on a job. It was a Tuesday. He had no handover. He had no idea what's going on. This poor guy. And I was like, well, let's figure out what's going on. Unfortunately, Dutch and Saudi relations were at an all-time low. Saudi Arabia had just canceled $3.5 billion in contracts and told almost every Dutch citizen to leave the country of Saudi Arabia. So my forensics guy had to leave because he was Dutch. These things happen, even in a massive hack. So then we discovered over the course of a few days, what had happened was they did not have very good cybersecurity. The password to their business email account was 123456. And it started with a suspicion whether a high-level person had emailed the ambassador, as you do when you're a high-level person, going, "Hey, I need a visa for this country." And the secretary of the ambassador handled the computers. This person gets a reply back, "Oh, I can facilitate that if you send this money to MoneyGram." Now, that doesn't sound right, as well as a few other emails. This person gets a hold of the ambassador and says, "What's going on? Is your secretary trying to, get money from me?" And she's like, "I have never sent that email." And so had to investigate, look in, and at first we thought it was just a very weak password. We'll take care of it. We'll see how else things can be contained. And so thought that it was fixed, made a lot of recommendations. Fantastic. Then about a week and a half later, I get summoned again. One thing you have to understand is an embassy, the ambassador is basically the king or queen. It's sovereign territory. You do not do anything concerning your embassy without contacting the ambassador. Now, in between, there had been some extortion attempts with some of the Middle Eastern embassies and Turkey. And again, we thought we had solved it, but the diplomatic corps of the Netherlands made an oopsie, did not speak with the ambassador. And so they sent an email, CC, not BCC, to all of the embassies in The Hague saying, "Hey, if you see any of these emails saying, give us, a bunch of money, it'll save many lives, signed ISIS, just contact us." And the attackers, turns out, were still on the email system. And so they replied all, and they said to the diplomatic corps and all of the embassies, "Hey, so glad we have your attention. You know that $25K from each embassy? Oh, no, honey child, we're raising that up." So eventually, with the taunting, the threats, the fact that they threatened to blow up a national landmark and kill the royal family, and over 400 guests, the National Terrorism Police got involved, and the emails were signed ISIS or IS, Islamic State, and the extortion went all the way up to $50 million US. And quietly, the city was under a very interesting undercover lockdown. We had private security. It was very stressful. So I'm going to go down to my favorite pub. It's not very far. I've got my spouse with me and an American colleague. Before I can step in, the bar owner comes out and he goes, "Chris, there are 3 men that have been waiting for you for hours at the bar just sipping tea." Now, I had already been told that they had found my name on a top 10 list for high value to either kidnap or kill from an ISIS list at the time. This was a little disturbing, but I was like, That's okay. Screw it. So I walk in and I go, hello. I hear that you three are waiting for me. They all give me cards. They're cultural attaches from the Turkish embassy, and they all want English lessons. Very interesting. Very, very interesting.
When it comes to like people coming into your local pub, were you worried about that?
The adrenaline was pumping so much. I was much more concerned about my family than I was about myself. The solution in that particular case was I was able to find the main perpetrator that was on the system. And unfortunately, that person had diplomatic immunity. It was an insider. So that person had to be handled by the ambassador and the government themselves. And unfortunately, that person got handled through other means.
We've touched on it already. Cyber warfare is really coming into play in every type of conflict now. What was the role of cyber warfare when it came to Russia and Ukraine, and how did you kind of become aware or involved in that?
In the build-up in early 2022, there were a lot of concerns that Russia was going to attack Ukraine. And by doing so, obviously, there are some very risky and dangerous things that could occur. And in my case, I was asked to stage in case of a nuclear cyber attack. So a nuclear cyber attack is when a nuclear facility, such as the Iranians were hit with Stuxnet for uranium enrichment. It could be uranium storage, or it could be the production of electricity from a nuclear power plant. Anytime you involve the word nuclear, it also has a psychological effect. But especially in the region where there had been such a bad nuclear accident, Chernobyl in Ukraine. So they were very concerned that something might occur at one of the production plants. It was very interesting because when I arrived on the 20th of February, I delayed for a while, thinking, oh, is it going to be safe? Are they going to really attack? I immediately got a message from Air France saying that all flights were then suspended. So I got the last flight in. The very next day, on the 21st, I got word that a water facility in Luhansk had been hit with a cyber attack, but that Russia was trying to blame the Ukrainians. On the 22nd, Russia drove tanks over the east and also destroyed that water treatment facility, causing us not to be able to collect any forensics. And then we all woke up on the 24th in Kyiv to Russian aggression. And in between, they took out the ATM machines, some of the banking websites, so you couldn't get cash ahead of time. Some of the currency exchanges were down. And the attitude of most Ukrainians were, yeah, we know, it's cyber attacks from Russia again, because they had in the past taken out the power in the country. Ukraine had been so used to cyber attacks that it was just expected. However, on the 25th of February, if you look up some of the pictures of what had happened, you would see hundreds of thousands of people against various border crossings trying to leave Ukraine. And in the night of the 25th into the early morning of the 26th, the Russians hit the Ukrainian State Border Guard with a wiper virus, which is now considered by many to be the world's first digital violation of the Geneva Convention. And I was the one that reported to the Washington Post and Vulture Beat because I was at the border trying to get into Syria, Romania, when we found out in the middle of the night what happened. And I had been tweeting out my journey on social media because we weren't sure that we were going to actually survive in our caravan. We had already narrowly missed shelling for no reason. One of my friends, an intelligence person, Dutch Osenkai, was trying to help our caravan through, so he warned us within seconds before Russia almost killed us. We already had to face down PMC Wagner checkpoints in the middle of the country. I ended up breaking my ankle and tibia through part of that. Then in between, all of a sudden, all of the border crossing processing in the dead of winter halted. And there are people, many people who were just walking because they didn't have fuel. Fuel was already restricted, or in wheelchairs trying to get over, or in strollers pushing baby carriages. And in the dead of winter, it halted. And the border patrol had to go to pen and paper because they had to make sure that that kid that you're taking out of the country is yours, or that you have a military exemption. But the wiper also took out the military exemption, the Red Book database, and a bunch of orphan and children in care database, which was then potentially later used to take children over to Russia to erase their identities. So it was a multi-stage attack. So I got to see firsthand the absolute suffering and human effects, and the fact that people froze to death because of a cyber warfare attack and caused a humanitarian crisis.
That's terrifying to hear about, and you kind of mentioned it's the first known case of violating the Geneva Convention from a cyber perspective. How worried about cyber warfare should we be in future world conflict?
So I've just recently come back from Romania, which is also on the front lines, and last year Russia was hitting their hospitals on purpose. I'm on my way to Bulgaria, and Russia was attributed to attacking some of the UN offices dealing with refugees, specifically dealing with Ukrainian refugees. So there is now nothing off limits when it comes to digital violations of the Geneva Convention. And that's the future of cyber warfare, unfortunately. To me, it also points to desperation on their part, because the more electronic means they have, that means they do not have the physical troops or the regular economy to keep this war going.
You continue to do this incredible work, even though you're putting yourself at risk. Why is it important to you to kind of fight for, I suppose, justice?
Well, I think it goes back to childhood, where this is my safe place, and I don't like the fact that technology is used to harm people. Regular people should not be harmed. We should be at the state where we have our flying cars, and we have the time to be writing poetry, not bad AI slop or weaponized tools by dictatorships like that. So I want my